So first off, we're going to start with what we call the compassion spectrum. So this is a spectrum that moves from sympathy all the way to compassion. And then we're going to break down what does that look like in the context of active anti-racist allyship. So first, looking at sympathy, we're all very familiar with this, right? This is those feelings of pity and sorrow for someone else's misfortune. It's disconnected from yourself. So what does that sound like? That is very similar to, how are you doing? I'm sorry you're feeling this way. So you recognize that someone is maybe in a negative state, but it's separate from you as a person. And then you have empathy. Moving into empathy, you have the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, whether that's from a similar or synonymous lived experience. This comes from a place of understanding. So being able to move from sympathy to empathy takes that knowledge piece, right? And so what does that sound like? I see you're not doing well and I can relate. Maybe I can help. So there's part of that piece that feels like I get it, but maybe I can do more. And then really taking it from empathy to compassion is the state of action. So you empathize with that person, that feeling of suffering, but you're also compelled to reduce or alleviate the suffering of that individual. And that is how we move from empathy to compassion, by importing that action piece. So this sounds like, I see you're not doing well and it pains me. I'm going to fight for you and I'm going to fight alongside you. So now let's look at what does that look like in the context of allyship.
All right, so let's really take a moment to kind of understand and dive into, what does sympathy, empathy, and compassion look like in practice in our daily lives? And again, remember, sympathy is just recognition, empathy is understanding, and compassion is understanding, motivating, and an action piece. So sympathy, step one, the farthest side of our compassion spectrum. Again, that's just recognizing that somebody else is in pain or is feeling a different way. But it's not related to you as a person, and it's easier to say, that's unfortunate, I'm sorry for them, but you move on with your life and you're not really impacted in the same way where it's haunting you or it's weighing on you. Because again, You're just identifying, you're just recognizing. So Bree, want to tell us a little bit about why there's a racetrack as a visual?
So in the context of allyship is how we're going to elaborate further, right? If we're looking at a racetrack, right, when we see people that are disconnected, right, from the pain that the other individual is suffering. So looking at race, for example, there's a lot of groups that see, well, why don't we just solve all of the lower socioeconomic problems that happen to more predominantly plagued minorities, right, and the Black community? And that's essentially looking at class, right? Class versus race, for one example. If we were to do that, even though we are moving everyone forward, we're still dispositioned in that. You're still going to have a group that is behind, even if everyone moves forward. It's still staggered progress. That is from a viewpoint that can be disconnected from that pain, not understanding the nuance of what it looks like to be affected by policies and community shifts in a specific group. So now going to empathy, right? In the context of allyship, again, that understanding. What you'll see is right now and the past few months with the Black community, you've seen a lot of other groups stand in solidarity, right? This is coming from a similar or shared experience, but saying, I understand what you're going through, even though my pain isn't the same. You're holistically validating that other person's lived experience and choosing to stand alongside them. And that is where you get those groups that can work together to push progress forward and show up for each other in that space.
And that's the same way. That's what motivated Justice in June, where I can relate to or understand Brianna's experience being a minority myself, but I don't have the same experience not being a part of the Black community. So it's saying that there's this common understanding of what it's like to be oppressed or to face an injustice, but that maybe our understandings are different, but we're still supporting. So it's beyond that recognition piece. And then that leads us to the last part, which is compassion. And again, compassion just builds upon empathy to say, hey, not only do I understand, I'm going to take action I'm going to do something so that I'm part of that solution and not part of the problem. So in the future, there's not another event or there's not another reason that you as an individual are going to feel this burden, because we're going to try to enact change. We're going to try to alleviate whatever that symptom is, so that in the future, we don't have to maybe have empathy for each other on that same issue. It's going to change so that hopefully we're progressing the movement forward, we're progressing our society forward, and we're taking action to be part of the solution and not complicit and be part of the problem. So again, what
Exactly.
does that actually look like for us? That could be a range of things. And we've seen a lot of the different ways you can take action on display over the past few months. That could be attending a protest. That could be calling your local precinct to talk about different policing techniques. That could be using your social media platform to speak out against injustice or to bring awareness to it. Be like what we're doing now, educating ourselves and working on our individual perspective so that we bring that into every conversation we have.
So, looking at all those different pieces of action, this is something we call finding your lane, where you figure out where in the sphere of allyship can you make the most impactful change that also helps to rejuvenate you. So, we'll talk about that a little bit further down the line.